Welcome to the Psycho Studios podcast. We are coming to you recorded live from the desert, Phoenix, Arizona. I'm Mr. W, and my co-host is Mr. Z. We are a father-son team that brings smarts and creativity to this podcast, as well as our newsletter, The Sprinkler. We're a TV film production company with a focus and passion on writing smart and original ideas. We are horror fanatics. We use this platform to connect with our psychos. The two topics we explore each episode, film and music. By all means, especially this time of year, let's leave politics at the door. Let's stop scrolling for about an hour. Take a deep breath as we share gratitude and appreciation for the little things. The Psycho Studios podcast, as well as our newsletter, The Sprinkler, are dropped on the first of each month. Check out our website, psycho-studio.com. That's psycho-studio.com. And where would we start without having at least one quote? So our quote this month is from Scott Weiland, the former singer of Stone Temple Pilots and Velvet Revolver, among other groups. His quote that really struck a chord with me: "My family is the most beautiful thing in my life, beyond anything else, even music." That's kind of haunting given the circumstances. An honorable mention, when Patrick Bateman in the movie American Psycho is talking to himself out loud and he says, "Evelyn Wood, my supposed fiancée." I don't know why I find that so endearing. So I'm giving that as quote 1A. This month's film and album, Mary Herron's American Psycho from the year 2000 and Velvet Revolver's Contraband from 2004. And Mr. Z, how you doing over there?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Most excellent. Do you want to jump right in? I know we keep this fluid, so if you want, I can rifle off some real basic stats, or you can jump in.
I think we should, we're going to be reviewing first the American Psycho.
Got it.
And I'm going to go off and give my score. I give it a 9.5 out of 10.
Wow. I wish the audience could understand the gravity of a 9.5 from Mr. Z.
So let's flip it over to you. What score do you give it?
8.5. 8.5. And we'll get into why.
All right, then. So just first thing off, let's go back to when the film was released and just say how much it cost to make, which was $8 million, and it grossed so little. I know we're talking about 2000, but to me, I still think this is a small amount. And it wasn't received well either when it first came out, so I guess it's not surprising. So it only grossed 34 million.
Well, and that's the thing is, I'll take that. I know you and I would when we release our movie. We'll take that kind of flip, but I know what you mean because there was a studio involved plus other production companies, and so they want to make a bigger buck than that.
Right, of course.
Do you know Lionsgate is the one that distributed that?
I do.
And they were only in existence, if you will, for 2 years. So this was really one of their first, if you want to call it that, big movies.
Right, for sure. And we all know what movie caused them to be on the map.
Tell me.
Saw.
Nice. We got in a Saw reference. I've been trying to do that for the last few episodes without really nudging Mr. Z because he's too smart for that. But yes, Saw. And as a matter of fact, they also changed that opening to their production company logo with the gears and everything. Because when you look at American Psycho, it's just that real plain Jane. I think it's lions, right? Yeah. So I love the gears, and Saw was a game changer for them, that's for sure.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about pre-production or anything about American Psycho?
I you know how I am. I'm a numbers guy, so I like to give the audience those stats. So we do have Mary Herron, the director. It was from 2000, as Mr. Z said. 110 minutes, so coming in just under 2 hours. Rated R. Mr. Z and I were talking about this earlier today. There is a non or unrated version. And so the theatrical one was rated R. Released in April of 2000. Mr. Z already covered the budget and box office, so I think we're ready to rock. American Psycho, directed and co-written So I forgot to mention that earlier, but Mary Herron, the director, did co-write the screenplay. The movie was based on the novel of the same title written by Bret Easton Ellis, and he released that novel in 1991, so about 9 years before the movie. And the movie is set in the excess age, at least that's what people call it, of the 1980s. Mr. Z, I can flip it over to you.
Before doing this podcast and rewatching American Psycho again, I was looking to try to get the book. If you want an original release copy, it can range anywhere from 1,000 to like tens of thousands
Come
of
on,
dollars.
really?
Yes, and a lot of the book is not in the movie because it is hyper violent, way more than it was. What are you saying? More hyper violent, but if you've seen American Psycho, it is pretty violent.
And hyper, when you use that term, I can only imagine how violent the book is then when you say hyper.
Yes.
I can't believe they're that much.
Yeah, but you can get a redone copy for like $20.
Sure.
But I was thinking about the original copy. I was just like, wow, how can you even afford to do that?
And stab me in the eyes because I could have walked into any bookstore back in the day because I was alive and kicking at that time, and I could have bought it for what, $8?
Yeah, something like that. And then you think about any books these days, if you had the original prints.
I know.
Yeah. Anyways, let's talk about, the beginning of the movie. So I'll start from like the very beginning, which is the opening credits. I think the opening credits are beautifully crafted. It's giving a misleading impression that someone else is being murdered or maybe cut or something, but he's just, crafting what we assume is just breakfast or lunch for himself. And I think what's so beautiful is that we'll go into a little bit later, but there's a scene where they give cards.
Business cards? Yeah.
And the credits actually are done in that same font as his card.
As Bateman's card?
Right.
That's beautiful.
And if you look closely too, when they showed his name.
On the card?
No, like his name in the credits.
Okay.
It's presented like it is, looking like it's the card. And it's done that with a few of the names aligned in time just right. So
that is awesome. Even though I've rewatched it a few times this month for our special podcast, I can't. Now I have to watch it again. I'll have to watch it late tonight. That's beautiful.
First rewatching again, I watched it just for pleasure before, but this time, really dove in like what is what. Seeing that, like you would totally miss it if you're just watching it.
Well, and I love the fact that you used the term. I believe it was beautiful. It is. I mean, I know it's listed as a horror movie. It's listed as a black comedy. You can just depends on what site you're looking at, but it is a beautiful movie.
For sure. And then I thought the movie started way differently than it does because it had been quite a long time since I've seen it, and they're sitting all in the restaurant.
The guys, right?
The servers, when they're speaking to them, I don't know if anyone else picks up on this part, but like how they're all talking, because they keep on going like table to table. I hear how the server's talking.
Sure.
They're all talking like the main character. It sounds like Christian Bale, how he talks so articulate but precise and soft. But they all are speaking like that, and I think it was very odd. And I didn't see anything when looking it up that was mentioned or anything.
It had to have been orchestrated.
I feel like it definitely had to have been not just a coincidence.
You can feel it, and it's such a great call out on your part. I wonder with something like that, is that the director? Is that, and obviously she co-wrote half of it, so it could be, is it the writers, or there's a person that does the production design, right? And I know that that's visual, but you think it's almost goes hand in hand. The way those waiters are standing so perfectly, and like you said, they're so articulate, and then what they're reading off the menu is just, it's so high level, like, I don't know, what kind of French fries are they? I should have written that down because it's so extreme, right? It's like the chefs are working day and night just to come up with that.
Yes.
And the portions are small.
Yeah. I think the movie doesn't waste any time to kind of hint at the central theme of the movie. And I think that stands out immediately to me because I think the very first moments in the movie are just already confused, and I think it was done on purpose for sure. And I think like the strikingly the whites, like I know it's the what time that it was set in,
1980s.
that
Yep.
the whites were really strong, but I mean they were polarizing white
Yeah, it's
everywhere.
hospital white.
And his apartment too, like how immaculate it was, like
Bateman's.
yeah,
Yeah.
how clean it was, and I could tell how things had to be exactly a certain way.
And even though he definitely spends a lot of money, it still showed he was a minimalist,
Right. No,
right?
for sure.
That's the funny thing about that, right?
And I think I wish I would have known what it was like reading the book back then. But to think about, Bateman's morning routine, how that might have seemed so excessive back then, but now that is just the normalcy.
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
even his might be even,
Undertone.
yeah,
Yeah,
like not even that
right.
big of a deal
Especially
anymore.
when you're talking about the elite and or like people that are in the entertainment business. Yeah, they scoff at that now probably.
And so referring back to where the movie takes place, it's New York, and you know, it's it's such a contrast with the interior shots are clean, nice, presentable, higher class,
Yeah, higher
but
class.
when
Yeah.
you're outside, God, it's just trash.
It's grimy. It's
But
dirty, right?
and it's beautiful,
Yeah,
though. It's just a
it
contrast.
almost reminds me, even though I know that that's supposed to be set slightly different, but it reminds me of The Crow almost,
Right.
where they display that. And just quick side note to the audience, especially if they didn't grow up in that time, but I can tell you that in the 80s, whenever you heard New York City mentioned, it was a shithole. Like that's all it was. It was the bad apple, not the big apple. And it was crime and it was dirt and it was rats. So she captured that and whoever else was involved at the design and that just the movie blows me away visually.
To go on visual aspect, at the beginning, it's I think it's really cool because I think you think of New York, of course you think of the Twin Towers, but just the how they show the Twin Towers at the beginning are they're obscured, and they're obscured by the office that he's working in, but you can almost not even tell that that's where they are.
Well, I think the only reason why we can tell is because we're so hypersensitive to it, right?
You're right.
It was just a year later or so, right, that event happened.
Yeah.
So it's haunting, and you and I always seem to capture that. It doesn't matter what, if it's an image or a cartoon, animated, it doesn't matter. We are hypersensitive to it. So you're right. But when the movie was shot, it there was, God, it's creepy to me.
Well, in the time period of the movie too, it wasn't set in the 2000 either, right?
Right?
So
No, it's saying good. It worked out, right? It's just so
everything
bizarre.
everything was well done and
Yeah.
established.
Fell into place.
So one of my biggest questions, like right off the
Oh, I
bat,
can't
watching the
wait for
movie,
this. Yeah.
is so Bateman's. What the hell does he actually do?
No,
Like
tell me.
what is his job? And
Oh,
and like what is the film doesn't even really dive into that all until later on, but like even then he says one thing, right? He says something about how he kills and murders, but she hears stocks and like
right,
analytics.
he says murders and acquisitions
Yeah.
or something, and she just goes right into because she's focused on being with a guy who's rich.
Yeah.
So she says mergers and acquisitions.
Hmm.
No, that's beautiful. I wanted you to be able to answer that because that for me, I give that movie a 9.75 for the first 2/3 of it, and that would be my edit. And I know they still made money, like you said. It wasn't a blockbuster by any means. Who knows what the marketing budget was? It seemed like they spent some money on that. I read some things about there was actually a website at that time, which is unheard of. There was an email campaign. But I think about, like, I love that first three 2/3, 3/4, and then I don't know what happens at the end, and I don't like it. I don't like that last part of the film.
What we have to talk about that later on. But
Okay.
I will have to discuss that.
We'll dive into it. Okay.
But he claims to do his job to fit in.
Right. I want to fit in.
Yeah, but where does he really belong? you know.
Well, and yeah, we don't know, right? And she mentions about your father practically owns that company,
Yeah.
and back then, and I'm sure it still happens now, but way more back then, you'd always hear about the executives in New York where the higher they went, the less they did. Like they wouldn't, they don't do any work. And you see him in his office. They show several scenes there, and he's never doing anything, right? When the detective comes in, and he's like, "I hope I didn't interrupt anything important," and he's got like the Walkman cassette player,
Oh yeah,
and just bullshit on his desk, and he quickly sweeps it all into the
I know,
drawer.
I had that in my notes of like
Sorry,
how swiftly he does that.
one
Like
spell swoop.
as soon as he reads what he's like right in front of it, it doesn't even matter. It's beautifully done.
It is.
But so the whole movie, is based off of Bateman. But anytime Willem Dafoe comes into the scene,
Wow.
I mean, I was gonna talk about that later on because he's not in this part of the movie
Sure,
yet.
we can wait.
But no, well, you brought it up. So his charisma steals the show. Like it's not even fair. No matter who's on the scene would be,
He
he's
just
the one
draws,
that
yeah.
it's
And we love Christian Bale, and he kicks ass in this movie.
right.
And Willem Dafoe is like a giant in that scene
Yeah.
compared to Patrick. Or Willie, sorry, Christian Bale.
And I think what's awesome is that they filmed to make it even more confusing. They filmed the scenes back to back, but they filmed him being aware of what he's done.
Who's him?
Bateman. So Willem Dafoe, the detective, they filmed the scene that he knows that he did all the bad
That
things,
the
right?
detective is aware he's guilty.
Right. And
Yep.
then they filmed all the scenes with Bateman as well. Like, oh my God, like he knows. And then they film scenes that aren't technically they're spliced together, but scenes where
The detective doesn't think he's guilty.
not guilty,
Yep.
and then where Bateman thinks that he's getting away with it. So they spliced them all together to resemble what you see in the film.
I love the fact that you called that out because that explains why in that sequence, especially, I mean, yes, we see him, the detective and him, they even have dinner at one point, but it's that initial one the most that it threw me. Now, I got better with it and I didn't know that was the answer until I researched it like you did. But that scene always made me like feel weird because I couldn't figure it out. And it wasn't the acting, it wasn't the dialogue, but you just mentioned it. Like that director's idea was to meld those three different takes together to make the audience feel uneasy. Like it was beautiful.
And it works.
Wow.
So there's a scene that basically reflects like the ending of the movie where he's taking money out of the ATM and it's so obscured you don't know what's going on. And he's walking towards the sidewalk where there's a girl at the crosswalk.
Yep.
And he's so smooth and he's so creepy, but he's smooth about it.
Smooth and creepy. Yep.
And then we don't know what happens, but shortly thereafter you can kind of assume that something really bad happened to that girl.
Yeah, you'd have to assume so.
Because it goes right to that scene where he's so upset about his sheets.
Oh my God, yes. So you saw that transition, which if you're watching the movie, and I mean watching it like you do, you know what happened to her.
Right.
Because they're basically neck and neck going through the crosswalk, and the director shows us the look on her face, and she is in panic. She can sense already that he is not right. And then, you stupid bitchy, he's got those sheets and they're just covered in blood. Oh my God.
Oh, it's cranberry juice.
Because that girl that he obviously has been with off and on at some point, oh, Patrick, I didn't know you came down here. And he's like, can you speak to them? Because he whispers or he quietly talks to the woman, the Asian woman, who's clearly one of the owners. And he says something about, I'll kill you.
Yeah.
Oh my. Wow, that is and you just connected the dots beautifully for the audience. So we do know what happened to that woman going through the crosswalk. And that's right towards the beginning of the flick.
Yes. And I think what's awesome, I mean, as much as we may not like Donald Trump or anything or do like him, I think it's awesome that he's so hyper focused on himself, and then but for some reason he's like, I think that car belongs to Donald Trump, and I'm
Right.
like, it's so out of left field and it's out of nowhere for especially for his character. Like, why would he care, right? But
Well,
he talks about it again later on in the movie.
well, he
But
even mentions, is that Ivanka Trump, who was his wife at the time?
right,
And I'm telling you, in the 80s, along with the negativity about New York City and the crime and the filth, you'd hear about Donald Trump. Like, I knew about Donald Trump in the 80s, and that was pre-internet.
right.
So it is a beautiful element that there's no way they could understand the irony there.
So I want to talk at least. I know it's been talked to death, but I at least want to bring up that card scene again.
The business card?
Yes,
Oh my God.
but I think that's what's perfect. And again, I think reading the book is going to help because I'm going to after all this. But he talks about, and they're all at a conference table, and he's talking about how he gets mistaken for someone else, and then
Marcus Halberstrand.
but the biggest problem with that is that maybe that's where you're trying to see that maybe he's not who he says he is, but he doesn't know that. That's the very beginning. That's the first time you see that slipping.
Yeah.
And so then they go through the card exchange about whose card is better, basically. Like that's all they have better to do.
The crispness of like putting the cards down on the table, it's so exaggerated.
But like his like inward monologue about all of it, even though they're speaking, like it gets really, detailed, even though it's just a scene about cards.
Yep. Oh my God. That card's even got a watermark.
Right. So it's just, and him sweating, and it was very thought out.
Yeah, and it's about a business card, and yet it's become so iconic. And he's the one, his character is the one that really kicks that off. He's like, check this out. And then people are, to use your recent talk, trumping him with better cards, and he's in a total panic over the fact that their cards are better.
Yes. And so that guy that, mistakes him, they go out to a lunch.
Paul Allen.
Right, Paul
Yeah.
Allen, and he's there before him, and he's late, and you wonder why he's late because you think he would be on time. I know he doesn't like the guy, but it's so confusing. And then Paul is upset and screaming at that guy, and so he matches his energy of being angry.
Well, because Paul Allen's even pissed that the place is such a. There's no one
There's
there.
no one there, yeah. But anyways, he just gets him to drink
Texarkana.
crazy.
Yeah.
Just constantly drinking. And then when they get back to Bateman's place, which is extra clean today because it's got stuff over the sofas and the New Times are on the
And he
ground.
keeps and Paul Allen keeps calling Patrick Bateman Marcus Halberstrand.
Yeah.
Hey Marcus, you got a little pooch or something?
Yeah. But so there's a scene, and I think it's so quick. And you seriously, unless you pause it or like have seen the movie many times,
Oh, I'm looking forward to this.
I paused it. And so when he goes back to get his raincoat on
Okay.
in the scene,
Bateman's going back to
Right.
get the raincoat on. Yep.
but he's also drinking alcohol too.
Yep.
But on the counter where he's grabbing the glass,
Okay.
there's a pill subscription bottle, and it's medication, and it's clearly untouched, and it does say Patrick Bateman on it.
Oh my.
But that's another reference of like, okay, instead of him taking his prescription,
Medicating, yeah.
he's medicating while using alcohol. And so then of course the famous scene of him, playing the music,
Yep. He
Right.
was listening to news, right?
right? And then saying, "Hey Paul," just calmly, but he's got the axe and he just, rips him a new head. And, then he which is so awesome is that, so a bunch of times, going back to that music that was played, so they had asked many people that was in the book. So from the songs, that's where most of the budget went to anyways, by the way.
Really? The music rights?
Almost 6 million of that went to the music.
Oh my
basically.
goodness.
But anyways, it talks about the bags that they were used, like the expensive, like Prada, all that.
Sure.
Right? But they reached out to all these companies. They all said no.
Yep. We don't want to be associated
That's
with
so
that film.
insane to
Yep.
think about.
because of the violence against women.
So, anyways,
No, and even Rolex. The scene
Right.
with the watch,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
was supposed to say that's a Rolex.
Right.
They
he
made
said
him
the
say
watch.
that's a watch. Yeah.
And then even he couldn't wear. Everyone else wears real Rolexes, and even that card scene.
Okay.
But he's wearing not a Rolex because they wouldn't associate.
They
Let him
said
do
your
that.
main character can't wear that. Yeah, it's crazy. They didn't want to be associated with that violence of women. You know what? You fast forward to now. What about Terrifier? Like you think about that, it's like it was so mild, and the movie, and before that, the book caused such an uproar because of the violence against women and the sex, and it's just, I wonder if it even would have gotten made. And I know we can talk about some of those details later, but the fact that a woman directed it and co-wrote it, I think helped.
So, anyways, when he's dragging Paul's body in that bag, uh, so this is another scene where he's dragging the body, and it's clearly there's not even like a cover up that it's a body in the bag, and then there's a blood trail, and he walks past that guard, and this is where you're like, well, now he's not getting away with anything, right? Because it's going to cause alarms. Well, that's where you can see another later on thing in the movie. This explains more and more. So, anyways, he puts the bag in the taxi, and then he comes across two people he knows.
Yeah, that one doofus.
And then he seems very alarmed about the bag, but it's just like, because he's like, oh, where'd you get that?
Yeah. Is that
overnight
a Louis
bag?
Vuitton? Yeah. Just to show you that how certain people were just focused on the excess. They only cared about the style, the design.
Well, so that's what it seems like.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing is, it is not what we think is happening. That's another thing that's pointing out, well, you would imagine someone would be alarmed about that. So maybe that's not, what we're seeing isn't really happening.
Got it.
And so after he does that kill, then that's when William Dafoe's character comes into the office. But it's just so strange. After not even that much, it was like less than a day, he would be coming into his office. So again, is that in his mind that detective is coming?
The key there that threw me, and I get what you're saying, like you're putting me on the right track with this movie now. I'm going to look at it completely different, so I love your insight. But is that Willem Dafoe's character is a private detective, right? So he was hired by the family,
Right.
as opposed to him being a police officer.
Well, but why would if they were that worried about him, why would it be so fast? And why would William Dafoe say, "Oh, we don't want to, make a big deal of this"?
Yeah, let's keep it under lock and key. No, I got it. And
Which doesn't make any sense.
can we give a shout out to Jared Leto for being the kill that you're talking about, being put in the suitcase? And also, can we give a shout out to that beautiful axe?
Yeah,
I know I shouldn't say that, but
All
that
that's-
chrome axe,
Yeah,
you can see yourself in it.
yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. So again, I was gonna say it's weird that the family, the silence.
No, that's a great call. Yeah,
It's just very odd.
yeah.
But I think it's pretty awesome that Paul Allen, like you said, Jared Leto, it's a coworker, becomes his first victim, right?
That they show us, right?
Yes.
That they show us, because we're still going to assume that woman he was in a crosswalk with, he
Right.
murdered her.
So this is how we're starting to wonder what's really going on at this point of the movie. So what happens after that?
After he kills Paul Allen,
And the
then
detective comes?
Detective comes in. You tell me.
What do you mean tell you?
Yeah, just what?
No, I just talked a lot, so go ahead.
Well, so you want me to take it from there with the movie as far as?
Or whatever you want to talk
Yeah,
about.
I think what's interesting. I was confused, and I've seen the movie so many times, so I'm still confused, and you're shedding some really interesting insights. But we have the whole element where he's got a fiance, played by Reese Witherspoon, and I will call out that the cast is amazing. Like everybody in it is so good. It doesn't matter what level role they have, and it's interesting how little they paid most of the actors, but it's a great ensemble cast. So you have that whole dimension of Patrick Bateman. He's engaged, but he's also clearly he's having an affair with that one woman. He even gives us that narration. It's actually the woman who's engaged to that doofus with the red hair that sees that bag, or does he? And then we have people are still considering him to be Marcus Halbestrand, or however you say his name, because at that Christmas party, he even is talking to somebody and he's using the name Marcus. And then Evelyn Wood, his fiance, comes up and says, "How come he's calling you Marcus?" And there's so many Easter eggs to me, especially like even at that Christmas party. You've got his fiance comes up and she's got a Vietnamese potbelly pig. And that was such a big deal in the 80s. It was like, you can get these totally adorable pigs and they're trainable. And what they didn't tell people that they were selling them to is that they're going to get big. Everybody thought they were going to stay small. So there's so many Easter eggs like that. And then you have the music that's playing intermittent. It's just, it's such a great feel. And then you transition from that Christmas party and you have Patrick Bateman. Now he's going to start seeing some prostitutes. And that's the part, at least from what I've read, where the unrated version is only about 18 seconds longer, and it's to do with the sex scenes or the sex vocabulary. And he picks up a prostitute in a limo. She comes back to his place, even though she says, "Well, I'm really not supposed to do that." And he even has another prostitute come in. He calls her in, technically a call girl, and they have sex. And you can see like how that movie was turned off by a lot of mainstream because they couldn't handle that. I mean, you're talking 24 years ago and they were showing that kind of sex. And the funny thing is you don't really see, there's not a ton of nudity and you don't see anything actual. But it's still very raw the way it's shot. And then I think you called it out earlier. It's the contrast with how wherever he lives, it's all neat, clean and organized, and yet he's a son of a bitch, right? Even when he calls Evelyn Wood up because he wants to go out with her, he's navigating again like he doesn't even have a fiance. He's acting like he doesn't have a girlfriend, let alone a fiance.
Right.
And when he calls her up, everybody wants to go to Dorsia, this super famous restaurant. And even earlier in the movie, when he's with his guy friends and they're going to different restaurants, and he's like, "Well, how come we couldn't get to Dorsia?" And I believe the quote is, "Well, Bateman wouldn't give the maitre d' head." So it's fast and furious. Patrick Bateman is in his penthouse or whatever it is. You can tell he's been working out. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is playing.
That's after this.
Okay.
Right. That's after he gives them money and
the prostitutes.
He's hurt them.
Yeah,
he didn't kill them.
Yeah,
he had like this weird. It seemed like used previously, but like a weird like torture kit that had like these weird knives.
My God.
And then he pays them and they leave, but they're still alive. And then he's working out with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre on the background, which is one of the hugest foreshadowings, right?
Wow.
Like that was nicely done. But she survives too. Right, she gets away. So they even show that he's chasing with the chainsaw,
and
then
she
gets on
right?
the truck, and they switch back to her surviving and being pulled away in that truck. Which, again, this is all foreshadowing.
It's foreshadowing. It's so deep. There's so many layers. Not only is it foreshadowing, Mr. Z, it's also what so many studies have said, right? Especially once the FBI started to really break down the mind of a serial killer or a psychopath. What do they say? They watch pornography.
Well, and just by the way, he always referenced serial killers throughout he's obsessed with them.
Okay, do you know that nugget about that one quote he says?
What?
So he's talking, I don't remember who he's talking to, maybe it's just the guys again, or one guy. And he's talking about, what the Ed Gein. He's quoting Ed Gein,
yeah.
right? The serial killer from the middle of Wisconsin,
right?
Which Texas Chainsaw is loosely based on,
right?
And he quotes him as saying, when he sees a pretty girl, the first thing he wants to do is be nice to them. And I'm not quoting, I'm paraphrasing. And he wants to love them up and be cool to them.
Yeah.
And then the other part of him wants to just tear them apart, right?
Yeah.
But in my research, Ed Gein never said that, which makes sense because if you've seen any historical data in Ed Gein, I don't know if he could put two words together.
No, so everything, that's the thing, is that that's the point. Is
Okay,
that everything that he
that
says
was
is not
intentional.
true.
Okay, because Edward Kemper, the serial killer,
Right.
he said that.
No, I know. So
Okay, good.
he says a bunch of references to people, but none of them are accurate. That's the point.
Got it. I love that, man. You are shedding so much light on this for me right now. I can't wait to watch it again.
So, but I think also the the Texas Chainsaw Massacre scene while he's working out just shows like him where this is the turning point of the movie where he like we have no idea what's going on because he is physically had a mental breakdown and you can just tell because everything is going wrong for him. So
And you nailed it. I guess you could almost say he's a compulsive liar then.
yes,
Yeah, and he even says so. Evelyn Wood. No, not Evelyn Wood's his fiance. I can't remember the other woman that he's having an affair with, who he says is basically perfect looking when they go through that earlier, and he's doing the narration, and she's completely hopped up on one of many drugs which he's referenced before. So she's not going to go out with him, and then he says, "We're going to go to Dorsia." And everybody knows, if you've been paying attention to the movie, he couldn't get a reservation at Dorsia that soon, right? Doesn't he call and they laugh at him?
yeah, they laugh at him.
That's all it is. That's the guy's response when he says he wants a reservation for
I
tonight.
think that's one of those things in the movie, and I guess it could be up to you to think that. But I think that he can't fit in, and he wants to, and he knows in the back of his mind he could never go to Dorsia. So it's that
Good point.
that wall is always built up where, of course, he could give himself time to call in advance, and like a
Right,
couple
set
days.
it up, and he's got the money.
But he he thinks so highly of himself and that he's so capable of doing something. So he's like, they got it to accept me no matter what, right? So
Yeah.
it's society too.
Privilege.
And so I bet you, and even back then, I know everyone can be an asshole, but I doubt at a huge establishment like that, if he called, they would be laughing.
Right.
So there's no way that was not in his head,
Yeah.
right?
No,
Just,
that's a
the
great-
mocking, like,
yeah.
oh,
That's a great call. And he takes her to a restaurant, which is clearly not
This is Dorsia?
Dorsia. And it even
Of course,
has a
dear.
different name on the menu. When she's,
He's not even hiding it.
no, he isn't. He's not even hiding it. That's a great call out.
You're gonna have.
Yeah,
so-
and he's already got the order. Yeah, like ostrich something. I don't know. I got to go through it and just write down the menu items.
So, anyways, he later on in the movie it starts to transition to where really he's just going on a killing rampage, and what's so beautiful is that so you can really see that what you're seeing isn't really happening, is that he's going to the ATM and he's taking out money, and he looks down and sees a cat. So he's already losing progress of what he's doing. And then he looks back up at the ATM and it says, feed me the stray cat. And so he's, holding the cat up to the machine. And then so quickly he changes his mind and he takes the gun. Where do you get a gun from? Right? So that's how you know none of this is happening.
Sure.
And he's putting it up to the cat. And then an old woman comes out like, hey, you can't be doing that. And why would the old woman be saying that if she saw that? Right?
She better shut her mouth. The guy's got a gun.
And he just shoots her and she dies immediately, right? And then so this huge spree goes on, right? He shoots, but that's how you can tell none of this is happening. When he shoots, explosions are immediately happening. The biggest fireworks. And
Biggest, yeah.
So I think that scene should be even just break down and classified on its own. But when he's done shooting those all, he's not reloading or anything. But he looks at the gun, so confused, and he looks at the expressions on his face and that gives it away immediately. It's just what the hell is actually going on?
Sure.
And then so he runs away, and he's running, and then he goes into what we're thinking is where he lives. And then the guy behind the counter,
Like a security guard, right?
right,
Yeah.
says a different name of who he is, and he's like, "What?" And then he shoots him, and then he goes to a different complex running, and it's not that much more time, and it looks exactly the same as the other place, but it's slightly different. and the same guy says a different name even, and it greets him, and they just just loses it. But then he goes to where he works.
So that's when he gets in the elevator.
It gets in the elevator, and is trying to pull himself together,
Sure.
but he can't get himself together.
Right.
And then so he calls his lawyer.
Yeah, his lawyer. Yeah.
And he gives like this whole speech, and he's like
About all the things he's done.
Right, but he keeps changing it. He's like, okay, well, maybe I did kill a lot of people, and and he tells him at the end where he's gonna be. Right, he doesn't remember even saying that to him the next day, but he tells him, well, I'm probably gonna be here tomorrow. But that's where the thing again, the current slipping, where he's like, well, I'm gonna be here. You'll probably find me. Right, so then it's falling. You're thinking, so he's hided out. The helicopter that was circling around wasn't for him. Why wasn't he caught if that was all happening? So
there's all this action, all this panic.
So then he just calls his secretary, and she's been the only one that's been really sweet, as we think.
Sure.
He's been the only one that's sweet and honest, and he didn't hurt her, and he let her go.
Right, absolutely. He invited her over, and he has that nail gun.
Right.
And it's the only one where he actually showed remorse.
Right.
He's like, I'm not going to kill her.
Right. But she tells him where to go. Even through all that, she's really worried about him. You can tell she's the only one that I think of anyone knows that something had been going on.
Yeah.
And then she finds his book where he's just
the drawings.
But I think that's what was in his head.
So
because if you look at the drawings,
yeah,
those are all the things that he did.
I thought so too. So the drawings were real. She finds that
she
book.
finds
it's
out
real.
because he broke down and was crying. So she was like, "What's?"
I better sleep.
Because all she's seen him do at work, because she's the only one that sees him for who he is that she saw him writing in that thing, and that's the only thing he's been doing there.
Got it.
So, anyways, he goes. This is the end of the movie. He goes to where she says that his pals from work are gonna be, and they still call him Bateman.
Yep, and the lawyer's there.
The lawyer's there because he tells them, "Excuse me, gentlemen," and he kind of puts himself together and goes up there, and he's like, real funny voicemail, right?
Yeah.
And then he keeps talking to him. He's like, "But I really did kill those people," and he keeps on pushing him, but he's like, he calls him by a different name again, not
the lawyer. Yeah.
And he's like losing it. And my favorite of the whole movie, my favorite scene is like, "Why is it not possible, you stupid bastard?" And he's really saying that because you can tell the reactions to his face.
Right.
And he's like, "Well, I had dinner with him twice."
Right, I had dinner with him. Yeah, and with Paul Allen. Yeah.
Right. And so you could just tell that he really had lost it. And when he sits down there, that's when he starts break down laughing, and they're like, what's up? And they still call him Bateman, and he just breaks down laughing because he's like, it just relief washes over him that he didn't do anything he did during the entire movie. And like what I was researching,
I mean all the bad stuff,
all the bad stuff,
the violent stuff.
Yeah,
got it.
He didn't do a damn lick of it.
All right.
And the sign that he's sitting behind, it says, "This is not an exit," is the end words that are on the book.
Wow. The last page of the book,
right.
The last words of the book are what is on the sign closing out the movie. That's beautiful.
And I think that I think a full circle is going to be reading the book because you're going to get a little bit more answers and details. But, I used to think it was confusing and not for me because I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah, not coherent almost.
But that's the point. And you're supposed to leave what you want to with the movie too. That's what movie making is all about.
Sure, your interpretation. Yep.
But if you want to break it down from like the filmmakers, from the characters into the book, what that was all meaning, it was just, someone that's having a mentally ill breakdown.
Yep. No, that's beautiful. And that was, even though that was 2000, that was still well before there was a lot of movement with wellness and mental health and that, right?
Oh, for sure. And just real quick before we switch to the album, because we're running out of time, the music, I mean, it's called American Psycho, but most of the music throughout the entire movie is simply just actual songs from groups, because Bateman's always listening to music on his Walkman.
Big music guy,
We're kind of, hearing from his ears almost.
Yeah, the soundtrack of his life.
But when there's actual music playing, it's beautifully done, and they're not hiding it. It resembles the actual Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho music.
Yeah.
Like it's not hiding it or anything. It is so beautifully. It's not the same thing.
No.
But it's definitely done the same tone. And
Contemporary.
It's got that Alfred Hitchcock
Vibe. Yep.
vibe to it.
Totally.
So that's why I give it such a high score, is because if you give it a 10, I think I could just give out 10s like my girlfriend likes to do with all movies.
She does.
But I have to say that it's damn near perfect. You know,
Cool.
there's not much I could really say that's wrong with it. And
Oh,
I think that, and I know it's in the book, so you can't leave it out, but I think that, and the sex scenes or leave a lot to the desire. Other than the first one where he's showing how self-centered and
Yeah, just
how
looking
it's
at
just
himself,
about him.
right? Yeah.
That's
all
beautiful.
About him. All about
But the
him.
rest of them is,
Yeah.
is that necessary?
Yeah. That
But-
was the excess, right?
Right.
Can I at least run through my ubigatory?
Yeah, then
Bullet
we don't
points?
have time for our music, just saying.
Oh, come on. We got to do both. You got to let me at least run through some of these
It's
things.
45. We're at 45 minutes in.
I'll do it quick. Promise. All right. So the author, Brent Ellis Easton, he was adamant that his novel could not be made into a film. Lionsgate originally fired the director. They didn't want Bateman in it, and Lionsgate hired Oliver Stone to direct and Leonardo DiCaprio. And I just think about that. What would that movie have been like? Both Stone and Leonardo left the project due to creative differences, and then they rehired Heron, who took on Bateman again. But just think of how
Leo
different.
DiCaprio was still on when she was rehired.
Okay.
And she didn't want him in it. She wanted,
She was set on Bateman. Got it. I like that. I didn't have that nugget.
and she took him to like a game or something, and it said something to him like, it was all passive stuff. It wasn't like, hey, don't be in this movie.
Like the Leonardo.
But
yeah.
she basically was able to change his mind by taking him somewhere.
Psychological. Nice. That's awesome. I love that tidbit. We also look at. Go ahead. You had something else?
Well, I was gonna say, you have something about when Christian Bale went to meet with the author, and he went in character to meet him, and he was totally freaked out. And halfway during the dinner, he had to tell him, "Please,
Stop.
you're really freaking me out.
I
Please
did.
stop this."
That is such a beautiful thing. And even Christian Bale, like they said he really struggled with his U.S. accent in this film. I couldn't tell. And then he stayed in character. He's such a method actor, which I know you know so much about Bale. But they said that he stayed in character, and all his cast members thought he sucked. They thought couldn't act and that he was a bad person.
Everyone, even Lionsgate.
Yeah, what the heck? Anyway, it was a great performance. Johnny Depp was also supposedly up for that role, which I thought, wow, that's crazy. The sequel is an abomination. I have to get that in real quick. And Heron, the director, said she didn't go into Bateman's background story much because she simply felt he was a monster. And then Bale said the same thing when he was asked about the role and, how come he didn't go into a backstory. He simply stated, Bateman is an alien who landed in the unabashedly capitalistic New York of the 80s. And Bale was already talking like that already. You talked about how he transformed his body. It was almost a 9-month delay. So he really was able to get in shape like he was. And like you said, fixed his teeth, the tan. Most companies, you talked about product placement, so we can get past that. The majority of the film is shot where?
I don't know.
Downtown Toronto.
Okay.
Only a couple of the exterior shots are done in New York, which is just crazy to me. Protests and challenges popped up in Toronto because of the women's right piece and the violence to women. And do you think it's true that Bale can control his goddamn sweat glands?
It's hard to say. I almost want to say I believe it.
Wow, because that's what the director claimed. It started with that scene you talked about with the business card, right, where he's perspiring.
Yeah.
And the author found the movie to be okay. He was happy it helped drive new interest in the novel of the same name. And there was actually going to be a TV show, which ended up being a fail before it got started. And we talked about him misquoting that as far as the serial killers, but you said that was intentional. And it sounds like I don't have time to talk about what the film meant to me. Are you going to share any of that before we move forward?
Sure, and we won't have time to do music, so let's go. We're just talking about the movie. That's what we wanted to transition to anyways.
All right.
So,
what does the movie mean to you?
So what I think is most important is that any movie can pull you one direction. But I feel like if you're watching this movie and you're not in the best mindset, I think it could really lean you towards wanting to get mentally better because you see someone that is so high up and it
With
seemingly has
everything.
everything,
Yeah.
and it's not enough.
You think about it, it's actually perfect for today.
Right. No, it's the movie was made, too early, but perfectly timed. So it's and the characters and all that, it couldn't have been better, if you ask me.
Oh yeah, you gave it a 9.5, and
Yeah.
you can tell how much you really enjoyed the film on so many levels. Anything else you want to say about it?
I think that, it's I know all movies are time capsules, but that's like a time capsule in itself.
Yeah, it's one of those that should, and I'm sure it has. I didn't look. I know that they're, the American Film Institute or whatever their official title is, they have those movies that they archive because of their importance for that time.
Yeah, I hope
Th-
this is one of
If
them.
it isn't, it would be madness. Anything else? So for me, what the movie meant to me, and I love your feedback there, Mr. Z. And I already talked about not being a fan technically of that last third or quarter, but now I'm going to be a fan just based on the light that you shed for me. And I love the fact that it was a twisted tale and that it was co-written for the screen and directed by a female. That was really unusual at that time, especially for that kind of movie. And all the things that we learned about the challenges of her trying to even get through the film itself. The cast is amazing. We talked about it, right? We got Willem Dafoe, we've got Reese Witherspoon, we've got Jared Leto. It was such a great film. I mean, you even got Josh Lucas, I think his name is, who does the voice for Home Depot.
Right.
He was in the Hulk, I think. He's usually a good bad guy, and Justin Theroux, isn't it? Like just people that all became big, right?
Right.
And in the movie's period, which is about 20 years in the past from when it was shot, it's just, you talked about it. It's stylish, it's smart, it's beautiful. And I don't know, revisiting this for the podcast reminded me of how much I really loved it. And the movie, you already talked about it too. It has such a, a huge amount of deep meaning. And now you've opened up my eyes even more. So I thank you for that.
Well, it's dark, twisted, and there's humor, and it's silly, and I love it because another thing that like shows you that it's not real what's going on is that William Dafoe, out of his suitcase,
He's
pulls
got
out that CD and he shows it to him.
Huey Lewis in the News. You a fan?
Yeah, you a fan? Like, why else would he pull it out if you didn't know he killed him or
Right?
And it just
And we already know that Bateman is a fan, but he denies it,
right.
or he poo-poos it.
Where he's like, I don't really like them.
Yeah, that's what he takes out of that briefcase, and you hear the clicks when he's
Yeah,
opening.
it's so
deliberate.
exaggerated. Yeah, but it's almost this. It's almost done the same autonomy as when he's burying all those clothes for Paul Allen to go on his trip to Paris, right?
To make it look
It's
like
the opposite contrast, but it's
is.
the same impact.
that's a beautiful connection there when he does the answering machine message. He doesn't even really change his voice that much.
No, it's so silly.
No, you're right. It has so many cool elements in it. All right, so we have a few more minutes, I'm assuming, right?
We're over time now.
Okay, just real quick, let's talk about. I always like to wrap this up, but what was going on in the year 2000 for real? So Bill Clinton was president, Al Gore was vice president. The millennium kicked off, and the whole Y2K thing, for the most part, where the world was going to end, laid an egg. Bill Belichick becomes head coach of the New England Patriots. Windows 2000 computer software is released. The Marshall Mathers LP, the third studio album by Eminem, is released and becomes the fastest ever selling studio album, at least at that time.
Much deserved.
Nintendo reveals their GameCube in August of that year. The debut album by Linkin Park, Hybrid Theory, is released, if I can say it. The first crew reaches the International Space Station. Hillary Clinton, let's not forget her, she becomes the first U.S. First Lady to win public office. She became a U.S. Senator. President Bill Clinton is the first president to visit Vietnam since the Vietnam War had ended. At the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, the third and final reactor is shut down. George W. Bush defeats Al Gore for the presidency in the closest presidential election in U.S. history. And let's not forget, American Beauty wins 5 Academy Awards at the 72nd Oscars. Kevin Spacey? But it's interesting to see the contrast of what was going on 24 years ago.
For sure. Well, I think that wraps up our podcast, and just moving forward, that's what we're going to lean towards is just focusing on a movie, and we'll still do some older movies here and there or past movies that have come out, but I think we're going to move forward with, more movies that are currently out or coming out.
Yeah, I like that. It's going to be the revised format, right? Starting in August.
And I wanted to thank everyone for listening, and I appreciate everyone that does. And I look forward to our next movie, which is still up in the air if it's going to be Maxine or Long Legs.
Nice. That's a 1-2 punch. I don't think we can go wrong. And definitely thank everybody for listening today. Any quick takeaway you want to give a shout out to?
Just remember to take your medication.
That is beautiful. And my takeaway is it is amazing to revisit old movies. Reach us at email psychostudio66@gmail.com or our website, psycho-studio.com. And our podcast and newsletter do drop on the first of each month. Be safe and stay psycho.
No, stay psycho.
All right, stay psycho.